The Haunted School. In the middle of an empty field, half buried in the mists of a sleepy town, sits St. Vincent's School for Children, a relic from another era. Abandoned for over 50 years, its brick walls are cracked and covered with thick vines, windows shattered and blank like dead eyes. The residents of the town speak of it in hushed voices, and even the most daring of teenagers dare not venture too close. St. Vincent's wasn't always abandoned. It was once a place of laughter, lessons, and learning. But in 1971, a tragic fire claimed the lives of over 20 students and a few teachers who had stayed after school for a rehearsal. It was said that the fire spread so quickly, no one could escape. Those who died were trapped in the basement theater, clawing at the walls as smoke choked their lungs and flames consumed everything around them. Their screams echoed throughout the building that night, and they've never truly faded away. No one returned to St. Vincent's after that. It became a place haunted by tragedy, a silent witness to suffering. Eventually, the town decided to let it fall into ruin. However, every now and then, the brave or the foolish would sneak in, drawn by tales of the supernatural. They'd hear whispers of the children who never left, or see shadows that seemed to have lives of their own. But they always left with a palpable sense of fear, and many of them never spoke of what they had seen. When Nathan's family moved to town, he didn't know the story of St. Vincent's. He didn't know about the fire or the children who died there. He was a 16-year-old with an overactive curiosity, and when he saw the massive, crumbling building looming in the distance from his new backyard, he couldn't help but ask around. "Stay away from there," warned his neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hensley. "That place is cursed, haunted by the children who died in the fire. People say that if you listen close, you can still hear them crying for help." But Nathan wasn't convinced. He'd always had a fascination with abandoned places and ghost stories, and he figured the old lady was simply trying to scare him. Surely, he thought, it was just an empty, broken building with a spooky story attached. That night, he convinced his two friends, Mike and Jenna, to join him on an adventure to explore St. Vincent's. "We're just going to take a quick look," he assured them, grabbing his flashlight. "It'll be like something out of a horror movie, just for fun." When they arrived at the school, the air was eerily still, the silence broken only by the crunch of leaves underfoot. The three of them stood at the entrance, staring up at the shadowy figure of the building looming over them. Its broken windows seemed to watch them, and the darkened door stood ajar, like a mouth waiting to swallow them whole. Jenna hesitated. "I don't know, guys. This place feels wrong." But Nathan laughed it off. "Don't be scared, it's just an old building. Come on." As they stepped inside, their footsteps echoed down the darkened halls. The walls were covered in peeling paint, the floors dusty and littered with debris. Faded posters from decades ago clung to the walls, and empty classrooms with broken desks lined the corridors, remnants of a place that had once been full of life. But as they moved deeper into the school, a strange chill began to settle over them. It was the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, making you feel as though you'd been submerged in ice water. They reached the main hallway, where an old stairwell led down to the basement. "That's where the fire happened," Jenna whispered, as if afraid her voice would disturb the silence. Nathan nodded, feeling a strange pull toward the basement. "Let's check it out. Maybe there's something down there. Something that'll explain all these ghost stories." Mike hesitated. Man, this doesn't feel right. I've got a bad feeling about this. But Nathan pressed on, and reluctantly his friends followed him. The basement was dark, the only light coming from their flashlights. The air was thick, damp, and smelled faintly of charred wood. They found themselves in a large, open space, with rows of wooden chairs facing a small, raised platform, the old theater where the children had died. Suddenly, a faint sound drifted through the air. It was soft at first, like a distant whisper, but it gradually grew louder, filling the room with an eerie, childlike singing. The melody was hauntingly familiar, like a lullaby forgotten long ago, and it sent shivers down their spines. Jenna's voice trembled. Do you hear that? They nodded, their faces pale as they listened to the voices filling the empty theater. It was as if the walls themselves were singing, carrying the echoes of those who had once been trapped here. Then they saw movement. A figure stood on the stage, small and fragile, its back turned to them. It looked like a young girl, her hair long and tangled, her dress tattered and stained with soot. She seemed to sway in time with the song, as if lost in the music. Nathan took a step forward, his flashlight trained on the figure. "Hello," he called out, his voice trembling. The girl stopped singing and slowly turned to face them. Her face was pale, her eyes empty black pits that seemed to swallow the light. Her mouth twisted into a smile, revealing rows of sharp, blackened teeth. And when she spoke, her voice was a raspy whisper that scraped against their eardrums. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. "This is our home now." The three friends froze, too terrified to move. Then, as if on cue, more figures appeared, children with hollow eyes and burned faces, emerging from the shadows like ghosts. They stared at the intruders, their expressions vacant and mournful, but with a flicker of rage burning deep within. "Leave," one of them whispered, his voice thick with malice, "or you'll stay here forever. With us." Panic set in, and Nathan turned to run, but the doors behind them slammed shut. The children began to close in, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Jenna screamed, backing away as one of the spirits reached for her, its fingers twisted and blackened, trailing wisps of smoke. Nathan grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a side door that led back up to the main level. They raced through the hallways, the sound of their footsteps mingling with the eerie laughter and whispers that echoed all around them. The spirits followed, their voices growing louder, filling the air with a cacophony of grief and anger. "We have to get out of here," Mike shouted, looking over his shoulder at the figures chasing them. But every turn they took led them deeper into the labyrinthine corridors. The school seemed to shift around them, the walls closing in, trapping them in a maze of darkness and despair. They could feel the spirits closing in, their cold, ghostly hands reaching out, brushing against their skin. Finally, they found themselves back in the main hallway, the exit in sight. But standing in front of the door was the same girl they had seen on the stage, her hollow eyes fixed on them, a mocking smile playing on her lips. "You can't leave," she whispered, her voice echoing through their minds. "You're ours now." Nathan stepped forward, desperation giving him courage. "Why are you doing this? We didn't do anything to you." The girl tilted her head, a flicker of sadness crossing her face. "We didn't do anything, either. But we burned. We all burned. And now, this is our home. The other spirits joined her, their faces twisted with grief and anger. They reached out, their hands passing through the air, filling the room with the scent of burning wood and the sound of crackling flames. "Stay with us," they whispered in unison. "Stay. Forever." With a final, desperate burst of strength, Nathan pushed past them, grabbing the door handle and pulling it open. The three of them stumbled outside, gasping for breath as they ran as far from the school as their legs would carry them. When they finally stopped, they looked back at the darkened building. The windows seemed to glow with a faint, unnatural light, and they could still hear the echoes of the children's voices, calling out to them, begging them to return. From that night on, Nathan, Mike, and Jenna were haunted by nightmares. They could still hear the children's whispers, see their hollow eyes staring at them from the shadows. And every time they closed their eyes, they found themselves back in the basement theater, surrounded by the spirits of St. Vincent's School, waiting for the day they would return. Because the spirits knew, one day everyone comes back,